Thank you so much for joining us here on the Voice of Job Seekers. Welcome back. We're done with our summer hiatus, our annual summer hiatus, and now we're going into the fall season, and hopefully we can bring you these 8 episodes, plus some bonus episodes that will help you with your job search. And again, I welcome to the Voice of Job Seekers. If you want to find more about the Voice of Job Seekers, go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com and you'll find the show notes there. And of course, if you want to lend your voice to the show, you can always do one of 3 things. You can press the same voicemail button to your right when you go to voiceofjobseekers.com. You can leave a message when your laptop activates the microphone on it. You can also call us at 708-365-9822, or you can text us there as well. You can as well just email me at mark@thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Thank you very much again for joining us. Today, my guest is Thea Kelley. Let me give you a little bit of background on Thea. I've been doing this a long time. She's written a new book called Get That Job, The Quick and Complete Guide to a Winning Interview. It has been called excellent on Forbes recently. For more information about Thea's services, her book, and her blog, you can go to greatjobsooner.com. Thank you very much for joining us, Thea. How are you? Now, we decided to entitle the episode The Yin and Yang of a Convincing Job Interview. And there are some differences we talk about as far as being real authentic or just kind of expect to be interrogated so much. So maybe you can give us a little bit more background as to why you think this is important.
It's half of the equation. So as you said, the yin and yang of interviewing is authenticity on the one hand, and the other hand is strategy. We'll get to strategy in a moment. So authenticity in a job interview doesn't necessarily mean you say the first thing that comes into your head, or that you're just winging it, or that you're bearing your soul in every way, but it means that you are being real enough that the interviewer feels like they're actually connecting with you as a human being and not being phony. And to give you a sense of what that doesn't look like is when you're reciting answers that you've memorized word for word, that doesn't tend to sound authentic. Or if you're using very stilted kind of language, like I possess the ability to do this, or if you're constantly saying implement, instead of just saying, well, what we did was, using big words when you could use smaller ones when the big ones are not better. Sometimes they are better. And not, burying yourself in jargon, and not hiding your feelings. Positive emotions can be really useful in a job interview. They want to see that you have passion and enthusiasm. And that's not a matter of saying I'm passionate about, I'm enthusiastic about. It might be something like saying, here's the part of this story I really love, and I'm looking forward to telling you this part. Or it could be like saying, one of the most fun things I've gotten to do on my job is blah, blah, blah. So it's about showing some feelings as well.
And yeah, being real means to loosen up and sometimes inappropriately, maybe even add a little humor to the situation, right?
Absolutely. And showing even a little humor. Yeah, it's always easier to relate to somebody when you feel like they're not hiding.
I think the one thing that you could do for all of the lack of preparation that many interviewers do, because I think we take it far more seriously as, we're being interviewed, that we can lighten up the mood and take away some of the nervousness that's often felt.
And, I like it that you brought up nervousness. It's a hugely important thing. And a person listening to this right now might be thinking, well, how am I not going to be stiff when the fact is I feel really, really nervous? So you have to directly deal with that. And we've all heard the things like take a deep breath. It's a cliche, but it's true. But let me give you something new is when it comes to these unconscious things like being relaxed or maybe, let's just stick with that for now. You need to mentally practice doing an interview in a relaxed way. So it's really helpful to do a visualization, so to speak, just vividly imagining yourself being in the interview and being authentic and being yourself and being relaxed. And what would that look like? And what would that, and actually feel what that would feel like in terms of your posture and your breathing, and actually hear what that would sound like in terms of your voice and the interviewer's voice. And this is a technique, it sounds kind of woo-woo, but the fact is a lot of athletes who are being paid millions of dollars use this technique all the time. They will visualize themselves throwing the perfect basket, putting the perfect golf swing, and they do that over and over again before they even get to the court or the green to actually do the sport. So it can work for job seekers too.
It's sort of a mind shift, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot going on that we're consciously and that we're trying to be in the moment, but there's also so much going on unconsciously in our backgrounds, that sometimes it's kind of hard to put together.
Yeah, and you can view it as manifesting, or you can view it as psychology, that what you're doing is basically teaching your unconscious mind to behave that way and to expect the interview to go that way. And therefore, those expectations will tend to carry out into it actually happening that way.
Being real and authentic is going to come through in one form or another. It's going to come through either in what you do know, what you're prepared for, and that you've really been able to focus and hone your answers to a certain amount of science with keeping the authenticity, or your lack of preparation will show itself, and sometimes it rears its.
You said it. If you're coming across inauthentic, you're coming across fake. But one thing that can help also, here's another important point, is you need to go into the interview remembering that the interviewer is a human being and not viewing them as an object of fear and as some, high and mighty power holder. I think it can be really useful to kind of practice making friends with them in your mind before you ever go in. Think about that person. If you can find info about them or a picture of them online, great. But even if you can't, make it up. Start to think, let me see, Mark, we have in common that we both really love Creedence Clearwater Revival, and we both have a cat that we make up silly names for. And by thinking about these kind of things, you begin to feel like, oh, Mark and I are buddies. And that can actually help prepare you to be more interested in the other person and more warm. And that's part of what authentic is, too. It is really being authentically.
You said CCR, whose music I do actually like. I mean, Down in the Corner is something I sang a lot as a kid. It was one of my favorite songs. It's Ugly Head. Well, storytelling does add an element of realness and connection. And I mean, if it's thought out but not necessarily fake, and again, your preparation kind of brings through the story and the authenticity at the same time, right?
Yeah, and I think you're going somewhere with that. We were talking earlier about bringing your accomplishments to life by being specific with your examples and actually building out stories. Yes, because that's when it becomes real. If you're saying to the employer, I'm very good at this or that, or I have experience at this or that, that's still kind of abstract. But when you say, let me tell you a story about when I did that, then they can actually see in their mind's eye. It's like they're watching a movie as you talk, and it's becoming very real to them and very memorable, so that they're not going to forget it immediately afterwards. And also they're seeing it, and seeing is believing. They're much more likely to really believe that what you're saying is real if you give enough detail, visual details and other kind of details, that they can see it. Like, rather than saying the management was very pleased, It's more memorable if you say the CEO came down the hall and stuck his head in the door and said, "John, that was mind blowing." You know, so sound bites can make things more authentic and more real. And also just telling the story, simply what was the problem? What exactly did you do to change it? What were the results? How much difference did it make? How did you know that the team was functioning better afterwards? What did you see and hear that told you that? So yeah, stories really make things much more authentic.
Thea, could you talk a little bit about, um, you know, being interrogated or expecting to be interrogated as opposed to being proactive and, being more conversational?
That makes sense. Yep. And I think part of what you're talking about is being proactive in the interview and and going in there not just expecting an interrogation where they're going to ask questions, you're going to answer. They ask, you answer. But making it more of a conversation. And also another thing about doing a proactive interview, and this is where we get into the other half of the yin and yang, which is the strategy part of it, is if you go into it passively, figuring, oh, I'll just wait till they ask me a question and then I'll answer it, you're not guiding the interview. You're not going in with a plan. There are probably a top 2 or top 3 or top 5 things about you as a job seeker that will make you stand out from the competition. And it's your responsibility to identify what those things are in advance as best you can, and to go in there with those messages in mind, knowing that you want to communicate A, B, and C about yourself. And that means, so that means identifying what I call key selling points. And you might also call it your unique selling proposition. I also call these REV points in my book. It's an acronym, REV. And what that conveys is that for a key selling point to really work in the interview, or on your resume for that matter, or other places, it needs to have REV. It needs to be relevant. So whatever skill it is or quality about yourself that you're talking about, it has to be directly relevant to the job, and it has to be what the employer is actually looking for. It also has to be exceptional. It has to be something not everybody has. And then the third thing is it has to be, verifiable. Meaning, not necessarily that you can prove it in a court of law, but that you have some kind of story or evidence or certificate or something that makes it an actual fact. So that last part is really tricky, especially for some soft skills, which can be very important, like maybe being good at listening and drawing out other people. Okay. Many people will say, okay, I'm a people person, I'm a good listener. Everybody says that, and it sounds like it's your opinion. And how does the interviewer know it's really true? So to make that verifiable, what you could do is you could mention having been selected to mentor people where you work, and maybe mention the results that came out of that. Or you could mention that there's a LinkedIn recommendation or several of them from people you've worked with saying that you have good people skills and you really listen. So you need to point to some kind of thing that makes them believe what it is that.
Without being inauthentic, but there needs to be some kind of intention in building some chemistry, because you're going to be working with that person, right? You're going to be connected in some kind of way, and they got to kind of picture you being with them on a daily basis in a way, right?
Yep. It's about skills, but it's also about fitting into the culture. It's about chemistry between you and the interviewer. That actually brings to mind something called the 3 C's of interviewing. I believe it's a concept that originally developed with a company called Lehigh Harrison, but the idea that interviewing, you're there to prove 3 things. One is competence, that you can do the job. And everybody knows you're there in an interview to prove that you're competent. But the other two parts you forget about, that you're also there to prove you're compatible with the company culture, that you can fit into the kind of company that is, and also that you're there to show that you can form chemistry with the people. In other words, do they like you? Does the interviewer like you and want to be around you 8 hours a day? So authenticity and strategy are both involved in making sure that you're communicating your chemistry as well as your compatibility with the culture and your competence to do the job.
Is there any last bit of advice you'd like to leave the peoples, so that so that we're not missing anything, and maybe connect a few of the dots that we've already talked about?
The other thing that's really important is the first answer, the tell me about yourself answer. And that needs to be both strategic and authentic. And so you need to have that kind of carefully worked out so that you are making those all important key selling points, getting those in there. But you don't want to sound like you've rehearsed the whole speech, because then that's not authentic. So just a tool I offer to people is the key points outline, which is you decide what are the 7 things I need to be sure, or 5 things I need to be sure, and say to them when I answer, tell me about yourself, and write those down and memorize that. But then you put them into your own words, authentically and spontaneously in the interview. And that's easier said than done, and that takes some practice.
So much for coming on the show. Appreciate you and spending a little time with us. For the rest of you, thank you for joining me here, the Voice of Job Seekers. Feel free to down the podcast on Apple Podcasts, now formerly known as iTunes. Leave an authentic review, an honest one. Hopefully that you'll join us in a couple of weeks, where we'll have another show for you. In the meantime, thank you very much, and you have a great week.